recorded live.
Welcome to the AI Silicon Valley podcast, where we cover all the topics related to artificial intelligence. We are in the heart of Silicon Valley here in Palo Alto, California. This is podcast number 22. My name is Eric Nilsson, and with me today I have my co-host Rajesh Kadam. Today is Friday, June 27th, 2024. We're live. How's it going?
Hey, good, Eric. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful, sunny day in Palo Alto, California. Can't go wrong with summer. I think the first day of summer started a few days ago.
My God.
The gardens are coming in. We got tomato plants, black raspberries,
Exactly.
Everything, grapefruit.
I'm eating the black raspberries every day, trying
yeah.
to get my share along with the squirrels.
Yeah.
So
it's beautiful, and I think the rest of the globe is also experiencing, nice weather as well throughout the United States. I know that Europe's pretty nice too. So,
Yes.
I have a friend in UK, so it's that time of year where everything is great.
yeah, absolutely. Coming from the southern hemisphere, I'm originally from India, and never understood what was the fascination with summers, but after 20 years in the US or 25 years, now I know.
You realize it's a really good part of the year.
Best part of the year.
On the show today, we're going to be talking about building your own enterprise AI solution. So we're gonna pivot a little bit to what is it going to take you to start building your own AI solutions, and what does it take to get the knowledge? And so we'll start picking apart in the next several series of podcasts what are the things you got to focus on, regardless of whether you're doing it on-prem, whether you're using SaaS services as AI. So today we're just going to start drilling down into enterprise AI solutions. What does it take to architect your own? And we'll get into that today. But before we do that, in the news, Rajesh, I only have one news item that I kind of bumped into all this week, which is ChatGPT has been running slow. I've been doing image generation, and I get the we're sorry, come back later, or we're sorry, this is going to take a while, and then it never gets done. And I actually saw a crash where ChatGPT just froze, not on image generation, just on a complicated request, and so I'm wondering if if they're hitting up they're bumping up against a new model with new CPU requirements. I don't know what's going on over there.
Yeah, so I see that. They've made a big upgrade on the UI UX. Actually, I know it's mostly a blank screen, right? So when I say a big UI UX upgrade, people are probably wondering what on earth are you talking about? But really, right now there's create image generation is a separate sort of. They have a drop down, and within the drop down, I'm looking at it right now. Within the drop down, there's a create an image, there's a search the web, right, write or code. So they are kind of parsing out different requests, and obviously these are all going to different backend LLM infrastructures, right, in the backend. So better tuning, better responses, etc. And of course they have the connectors. They introduced Google, right, Google Drive, etc. But now I think they're going to just sort of expand on it. They have Box and Dropbox now, SharePoint, of course. So it's a more comprehensive strategy. It's probably putting a load on their servers. I don't know. It's just a guess, of course.
Yeah, of course. But I would say that this is the first week of the year that I've been engaged where I've had some interesting behavior, and I'm sure if I'm seeing it, probably our listeners are also running into some of that as well. So we'll have to go look around the web and see what they're saying about that, because I've seen it a few times now.
Yeah. I hope this has got nothing to do with Zuckerberg offering $100 million packages to AI engineers at OpenAI.
Trying to steal the talent away.
Yeah, there seems to be a big talent war going on, and I believe, Zuck personally has emailed apparently hundreds of AI engineers, hundreds or whatever that number is, but offering them jobs at Meta, and of course, so apparently offered 100 mil packages to some, offered a deal to Ilya, who was the chief scientist at OpenAI, and he said no. So then Mark went after his co-founder at Safe Superintelligence, right, which is a startup that Ilya co-founded. So there's a lot of action just around poaching talent, and definitely Facebook. Just in terms of news, I think Facebook seems to be in a bit of a desperate spot here. Looks like, or just there's a concern that they're going to be losing the game, right, the AI game. Meta started with sort of the whole open source strategy, but clearly, OpenAI continues to gain steam, and Eric, just whatever we were discussing right before we started here, there's the whole question of, okay, hey, what does it mean to sort of deploy, run your own, AI stuff? What is the easiest way? What is the most secure way for an enterprise to do, right? Like just hitting external APIs or APIs within your cluster and so on and so forth. So, anyway, from a new standpoint, definitely, Zuck seems to be on a back foot here.
Yeah, I heard
right
a little bit of that. I had not heard the 100 million number, right? Which is interesting. Like I know that my son went to work out of Carnegie Mellon. He's computer science Carnegie Mellon. They had a strong AI. He's an AI guy,
Right.
and he got $1 million package, right? Worked there for a few years and then walked away, right? Because he's like, well, I got $1 million package. I got a lot of money in the bank now, and maybe I'll go do my own thing.
Right.
And Facebook is a hard place to work, right? Like I think they have issues. I think they have issues, right? And so it's not surprising that they're behind because they're just a little bit bizarre, right? From the standpoint of not knowing where they're really headed. Right?
I think from a strategy standpoint, clearly, it was the whole open source route, right? And it seems like until now we've seen they've made some great inroads, right? The benchmarking of all these open source models, the Llama models, have always kept up by and large. I think only been about 3 to 6 months behind. So I think there's been traction, but I don't know. It's an open up in the air kind of question, right? Like open source versus going with the OpenAI and Anthropics of the world, right?
Yeah.
Where is the whole enterprise game going to play out, right? Like on the retail side, seems to be there's a clear winner. I would call out a winner. I'd say it's OpenAI. On the retail side, right? Individual users. Now I think it's enterprise is up for grabs right now. Corporate business accounts, right? That are going to use AI services. That's where the action is playing out, and that's probably part of the reason I think where Zuck is coming from.
Yeah, and where I see it in my own professional career is that we use a lot of the Google products, right? Google Docs and Google Slides and Google everything, right? And now Gemini is, enterprise, they're going at it from an enterprise, like you've already got the Google desktop suite. So we'll just give you AI as part of that. And, we'll train it for your enterprise. So they're coming at it. So Google's a player in the AI. So I agree from a commercial for end user perspective, ChatGPT just got them. Got the market.
Yeah.
I think the enterprise. I think Google's got a strong playing there.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I think Google has a strong playing. It's hard for me to dispel that, right? In fact, on one of the prediction markets on Kalshi or Polymarket, apparently Google is the bets are being made that Google is the front runner by the end of the year in terms of the leading model, right? Now, great, you have the leading model, but really, how does that translate to having users on your platform,
the business,
right?
right.
Yeah, OpenAI is this big juggernaut now, which has kind of gained so much steam and momentum, and it continues to deliver. That's a very important point, right? Like, you use the tool, it doesn't fail on you. Of course, we discussed that it's slow today, but really, it doesn't fail on you. It continues to give great answers to your questions, and they're continuing to iterate. So,
and you know what I also noticed this week in out in the real world, out in the jungle, as we say, on the street, was people talking to their phones and asking, right? Like, hey, ChatGPT, what is blah, blah.
Right.
So I've seen that now start to happen, right? Where at first it was, let me know, let me go text it, answer it, right? But now it's kind of like, I see it happening where they're asking, ChatGPT using voice.
Yes.
So voice is starting to pick up now, right? And
right.
that's an interesting one as well.
I think that's a big inflection point. Voice is going to be a huge inflection point, right? I've tried to use it in the car, with the kids in the car as well.
Right.
It doesn't really pick up that really nicely, right? So there's definitely lag and all that. But I think at some point it's just going to shift, right? Like it's going to get really good, near instant sort of feedback and so on, and then it's just going to be amazing, right? So I'm definitely it still continues to give value, honestly, right? Like I've had one-on-one conversations while in the car with just me, with my voice, right? With no other interference. I've noticed that if there's any background noise, it tends to it does get thrown off.
So I think we're also entering in a new phase here. I see a new phase happening where I was working with fiberglass resin, right? Broke a chair, right? One of the Herman Miller chairs, and it cracked, and I'm like, oh, I want a fiberglass. See if I can repair that because it's like a $1,200 chair, and I want to see if I can turn it upside down and fiberglass that. And I was like, I wonder, whether ChatGPT can tell me, how to fiberglass a Herman Miller chair based on what type of polycarbonate fibers are in the Herman Miller base chair. So I asked it all that, right? And and the guy that was next to me, right, like, he was like, "Oh, that's never going to get that, right?" Oh no, it got it perfectly. Told me what was in the chair, what was that, I didn't even have to. I said the popular Herman Miller chair, office chair, and it knew exactly. Then it told me what the base was, what would resin, epoxy resin with fiber matting, hold it, and it gave me the whole analysis of what was going to happen. And you realize that what I see the trend happening is in the days when websites showed up, everybody jumped on Apache, right? And everybody was building Apache websites, and we had the mid 90s to late 90s where the internet was born, right? If you're making a website now, you better have an AI. Right. If you're going to have a company website, you're going to have any website out on the web, right? If
it's probably built using AI first of all,
you're going to have an AI integrated into the solution, right? Whether you're making your own, whether you're using another SaaS service for it, you're going to need to build an AI solution into your website, right? Period, right? I have a buddy that runs a exotic race car company, right? And he has a whole WordPress site and ordering and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, what am I going to do for AI here now? Like, how do I accelerate my customer interface with, my customer interaction with AI, right? Plastics are different. They're hard to order. They're not, and he runs this, company that does parts and plastics and all kind of stuff. And it's like, he's looking at, I'm going to have to build AI into this, right? And next thing you know, like everybody that's ever built a website now, it's going to have to integrate AI, right? And that's for me. This is a shift from my head last week. It's like, okay, now the general users are using it, and now if you got a web property, you're going to have an AI solution.
Yeah, I mean, I think AI is honestly, it's table stakes now. Honestly, it is table stakes. That's just where things are going. Honestly, right? Like, I think a world where there's AI deceleration, let's say, is kind of becoming less and less probabilistic, let's just say, right? Like, so if you are in any sort of corporate role, business role, any sort of job, white collar job, you probably have to worry, significantly about, hey, how is this going to impact me? What do I need to equip? And if you are running a business, if you're head of a a team, small team, 5 people, 10 people, if you're in IT, marketing, sales, doesn't matter, right? Like, you have to be thinking about how do I implement, when I use the word strategy and not some high level thing, but like 3 levels deep, right? Like, what is my strategy? And probably the listeners on our podcast here are using some form of AI already in their day-to-day jobs. I mean, obviously ChatGPT, right? Or Claude, things like that. That's just for a Q&A, asking questions and so on. But maybe they're using, if you're in sales, maybe using Gong, or if you're in IT, maybe you're using some sort of AI functionality to do Q&A querying of all my tickets and so on and so forth. So and of course, there are different players, there are different levels of sophistication. Some of the legacy players are still sort of behind the curve in terms of introducing AI. Obviously, they have internal efforts going on, but it's still not completely trickled down to the front end of what users are doing. But I'd say, right, like, I think the time has come now, to move from pilots to production, right? I mean, the word on the street is that a lot of enterprises are doing pilots, right, which is great, especially around agents, right? Like, but agents are notoriously difficult. I mean, there have been a lot of failed experiments, and we personally have experience building agents and multi-agent systems, and I can tell you, like, it's just like very hard to get them to work together effectively, right? Whether it's a swarm, whether it's supervisor models, and so on and so forth, and the error rate multiplies across each agent that you have in your stack. That's a problem, right? So if you have a 70% or 80% efficiency on each of those, and you have 10 of them, boom, your whole
Like, so
system
you
will
only
fail.
get like a 10% of it.
Exactly,
Yeah,
right? Like that's the challenge actually. So there's some, I think, interesting gotchas there on how to sort of improve on them, starting with one at a time and so on, right? So that's on the agentic layer, but then agents need data, right? And so there's first party data, there's third party data. And I think from an enterprise standpoint, I mean, that data is the moat, right? Like enterprise data that you have is where I think you can get a ton of benefit, right, with your AI models, right? That you, not just models, but whatever is your AI stack, let's just call it, right? And that's going to be a combination of some AI native players, and then you have these legacy players that you've been using for 5, 10, 15 years, right? Like let's say Atlassian or Jira and so on. And maybe it's very deeply baked in, right? Or Salesforce or HubSpot. Like, I mean, I can multiple examples, right? Marketo. How do you leverage, depending on the vendor, what they're offering, how do I integrate that with, say, a newer generation player? Like, I mean, even what PipeIQ has built to date, right? Like, you can take that, or Clay, right? Like, there's newer stuff out there that you should absolutely be integrating into your stack, right? And you need to think through how is this going to be stitched together effectively, right? And what is your data pipelines? I mean, maybe you're a Snowflake customer, Databricks customer, maybe use Kafka, right? Like, depending on what you're already doing with your data and data pipelines, there can be like sort of a LLM layer on top of it, and top of it is where agents come in, right? And you can activate actions basically on top of that data, really, to get stuff done, right? Productivity boost and so on and so forth. So I mean, even as an AI founder, I'm feeling the FOMO, honestly. Like, there's just so much opportunity. It's insane. It would be a pity for you to not kind of leverage it.
So we had some conversation before we started the podcast of like, if we were coaching people on how to begin, to either learn AI, right? Or you've already done AI and you're starting to architect a solution for your enterprise, right? And so I think there's two models for approaching AI. One, and I'll just throw this out as hypothetical. You can go on Amazon right now and you can buy for $99, right, a complete Raspberry Pi 5 CPU, fan, power supply, case, right, with a 16 gigabyte SSD or something like that gives you storage, right, so that you, and an 8 gig memory Raspberry Pi, or you can get a 16 gig Raspberry Pi for like $125, right? So for $100, you can then go get that Raspberry Pi, and you can go download Tiny Llama or GPT-4 All, right? Both of those are open source, free, right? And they'll run on Raspberry Pi 5, right? So for $100, you can start running a model, right?
Absolutely.
Install, set it up. Raspberry Pi is a little Linux, right? So you learn a little ls-l command set, right? But then you can have your own private AI model running on a $100 server, right?
Yeah, sure.
Because the ARM CPUs are pretty good these days, right? They're enough. And I don't believe that the Raspberry Pi even has a GPU, so you're not going to be doing a lot of learning, but it has enough to the CPU must have enough to do inference, right? So you can ask it questions, and the free Llama model actually allows you to basically do question and answering chat with that model, right? But you're running your own model in your own home, and that's how you can get started, right? Sure. Now also, you can get an x86 machine. You can go get. I think I looked at an AMD. Radeon something or other that's 12 core, 24 thread with a GPU embedded in, shared memory across the device, and that's like $800 right now. That'll get you a full model. That'll get you, you're not just running a tiny model. You can go get an open source model and run that. You can run full Llama on it, and then you can do RAG on that too, right? So you can augment your data set, right? And get your own private model going, learning, and do something with it, right? Just to learn the basics of what is a model, how big is it, how do you download it, how do you install it, what's it look like, how do you do RAG on it, and literally you should be able to get you should be able to be running this model. And I have friends that have went and got the models and got them running in a day, right? On their own local hardware, right? So now that's not something you're going to do much of, other than I look back at some of my, my early web days where we were getting patchy, right? And we had websites running under our desk, right? We had a little server, and we set it up and we ran it, and actually we had customers on it and they were using it, right? And we exposed it, out on the internet, because the internet was new and free. And eventually we turned all that into enterprise solutions, right? Over time. But for the first year or two, we ran stuff that was sitting under our desk, right? We spent $1,000 on. 5 years, 10 years later, we were spending $400,000 on it, and we had moved it to the enterprise. But to get started, to start to become AI savvy, right, with your own models, it's an interesting thing, right? Now that's one approach, right? The $100 Raspberry Pi 5. You can go get an Amazon today. Go look for the kit. Or you can get a AMD GPU and play some video games and also have your AI on that.
Right.
But then we were talking about or you can just go look at some SaaS services and spin stuff up without spending any money.
Yeah, I mean, look, in the 2000s, I mean, there was no SaaS, there was no cloud infrastructure, right? So cloud is the new kind of hardware stack, you could even say. Right?
No, I would argue that us at Broadcom are saying no, cloud was a fantasy that just cost you a lot of money. Right? Like, you're better off having an on-prem data center.
Look, it is more expensive, no doubt about it, right? Like, but
they suck you in. And the next thing you know, you're getting $1,000 a month bill. But no,
I mean, instead of waiting for your Raspberry Pi to come, spend $100, wait for it for 3 days,
and then it doesn't really do anything,
or you don't know how to spin it up, right? So it all depends on what. I mean, again, it all depends on the profile of the person, right? And how are they into sort of hardware, writing their own code? Are you more of a marketer, sales guy who is just interested in building some apps that helps you with your day-to-day jobs, right? Like, maybe I need to answer 100 emails or call 50 people, right? Like, whatever that is, or keep on top of 50 accounts that I need to prospect into, right? Like, and those guys are not gonna. I mean, the Raspberry Pi is not going to be very little used to those kind of use cases. So it all entirely, I think, depends, right, where you are in the spectrum. But I mean, again, as we were sort of discussing just before the podcast, like, there is the what and then there's the how, right? So I think we don't need to answer that anymore, hopefully, right? Why AI, I think, is kind of pretty convincing at this point to a lot of people across the world now, right? So, but what I think is actually making the brain spin, actually, right? Like, because so many options out there, right? Especially from a tooling standpoint, agents, SaaS applications, etc., that all claim to do AI, and many of them claim to do the same thing, right? Like, how are you going to even distinguish, right? And what does a pilot mean? What kind of benchmarks do I need to be tracking? And how do I go from pilot to production? Like, what kind of approvals do you need to worry about? What about security? What about SOC 2 compliance? I mean, there's a whole can of worms this thing has opened up, right? Which were not necessarily seen in the previous generation if I had to buy SaaS apps, right? And of course, SaaS apps opened a whole new set of things that probably were not there before SaaS, right? But I mean, I can give you a very simple example, right? When companies go from the CI/CD pipeline from dev to production, when you deploy agents, you don't know what is the response you're going to get, in the sense that you've tested it in production, but it's all a non-deterministic system. That's the big challenge, and that's a huge change in software. Right? Until now, everything was deterministic, right? You knew, right, if you give input X, you're going to get output Y, right? Like, that thing is broken now. You can give X 10 times, and all those 10 times, the Y, the response will be 10 different things, and you're screwed. Like, you're screwed in a sense. How do you test for this? What's your testing framework, right? How do you make sure that the thing doesn't blow up in your face when you actually go into production? So I think benchmarking of the models and benchmarking of the agents, right, that the model uses, or rather the agent, the model it's using, right, has to be thought through, right? Like, so if you have a multi-agent system with, let's say, 15 agents, right, each of them can be bolted onto a separate LLM, right? And each of those LLMs can be fine-tuned depending on your use case of what it is doing, right? And each model is good at different things. but you have to test this before you go to production. So it kind of presents a different set of challenges, and we haven't even spoken about model MCP servers and so on.
So listening to you, I would argue that maybe there's in learning how to do this, there's a framing skill set that you need to develop, right? Which is, there's so much out there that maybe you need to frame what you're trying to solve for, right?
Right.
And that if you get caught up in all the different, capabilities and agents, maybe just picking one. Right. And I look at, Tesla and, how they got into, they had one thing they were doing.
Right.
Drive the car.
Right.
That's it. They were going to try to solve for and connect.
But driving a car is an extremely complex endeavor, though.
Except then you have your own data set, right? They're going to build their own data set.
Right.
They're going to collect their own data set,
yeah.
and then they're going to focus on doing that one thing, right? So instead of trying to solve for the world, right, and connect it with 15 different agents, and no, pick one thing,
right?
Solve for that,
right?
Build a plan for it.
Right.
Don't overcommit. Don't get delusions of grandeur when you're architecting your enterprise solution.
Right.
Look for one thing that you can do well, right? Yeah. And then design for that. Choose a service that'll solve for that. Yeah. And do not fall into the fantasy of every Silicon Valley startup that wants to sell you some new AI whiz-bang thing that'll get... Because to your point, when you start marrying 7 of these things together... next thing you know, it's not deterministic, and so keep framing your problem might be important at the beginning.
I think in fact, I mean, now that you bring up framing, honestly, what's coming to mind for me is if you have 50 different teams in an organization, or even 10, right? All 10 of those teams are thinking about AI. How can I bring AI into my work? They should be, at least, right? Even as a company, as an enterprise, even small scale, even if you're 1,000 people or 3,000 people size, you'll need to think about, okay, what's going to be our coherent sort of approach here, right? How are we going to sift through our options, and what's the kind of LLM observability that we have, right? Are people, of course, is data leaking through our system out to outside our firewall, right? Which we, of course, don't want, right? So what kind of, that has to be balanced with giving access to external systems, right? Interesting things that are useful and are not harmful. So, I mean, I was talking to an architect just yesterday, works at a really large company, and he was telling me how there's a bake-off going on between a VP brought in a vendor who's going to help, sort of pilot, sort of do some AI implementations, right? And that versus they are going to internally try out some tools and see what they can do, right? Onboarding that vendor is like 6-month process. I mean, that has not changed with AI. I mean, I guess that was the case.
You can get a Raspberry Pi for $100 and get it going.
No, they are going to be trying different things, right?
6 months to onboard a Raspberry Pi.
No, that's a vendor versus, hey, we're going to try.
I'm joking.
Anyways, I mean, all I'm saying is, I mean, the vendor onboarding thing is not a good apples to apples, because that would have been true even 5 years ago at that company, right? So nothing has changed with AI. I mean, hopefully AI will change it, right? But
then it gets back to framing, right? It gets back to framing what you're doing so that you can take one thing and implement it, not see feature creep, right? And focus on it. And I could see where example of this week was we did a big product launch, and they decided to use an AI to AI person voice to do the demo.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
And
okay.
It was bad. Yeah, it was the idea of, I think there's a lot of places where people want to show off that they're using AI, right? And but they're not, again, frame it and then keep it simple.
Yeah, I think keeping it simple, I think, is a good idea, honestly. It is a good idea, because I think if you go too far out, right? I mean, even just with voice, as we were discussing, right? Things can fail, and with a voice and a face, right, video on stage, I have seen a demo from a vendor blow up on their face completely for somebody that was trying to deliver voice.
For me, they were just building something that didn't need to be solved for.
We
have a person that can do a demo perfectly fine. But let's use an AI person to do it, right? Why? Why don't you just have a person do it?
Right,
You know,
right.
we had 3,000 people show up, right?
Oh my God.
You could have had
Whoa.
a strong person do
Right,
the demo and be happy, right?
right,
But do an AI that do the demo. It's like what?
right, right.
Okay, I'd rather see a person personally, but I know we also talked about there's scoping, but now I forgot what it was I was going to say. Look, the data sets, right?
Yeah, right.
The data sets, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so one, you got to scope the problem,
Yes.
and two, you have to make sure you have access to a data set, right? Like back
Yeah.
to car Tesla, like
Yeah.
they get the data set from the cars driving around the streets, so they own a data set.
Yeah.
So to some degree, you secondly, one, frame the problem, and then two,
Yeah.
make sure you have a data set to work with, right? Because AIs work with a data set, and you're either gonna have to buy a data set, or you might have a data set in Databricks, right? As you've mentioned, because you guys work with Databricks.
Yeah, we are with
right?
Databricks partners.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
so we work with.
So you
yeah.
do need the data. So then that's the second thing is like
Yeah.
for me, if you want to play with some of this stuff, even if you get a Raspberry Pi and you want to do some RAG on it, right? Like augmentation, you're gonna have a data set or some data to work with it to make your AI custom.
I mean, I think the whole there is no two ways about it, right? Like I think there is general consensus at this point now that data is super important for the models. I mean, without data, AI you can't do much. I mean, forget the training. Obviously,
Right.
for training, the whole internet has been scoured, and these models have been trained on it. But even for fine tuning, actually, you need data, right? For it to function effectively. So. There's data for fine tuning, and then there's the RAG piece, which is retrieval augmentation, right? Like so of my internal repository. So data, all in all, super critical, right? And then you have the first party, third party data. Clearly, first party, I think there's a moat, meaning it sits within your enterprise. And you have to be able to take advantage of it, and only you should be able to take advantage of it also, right, as a corollary, rather than giving it out to third parties, right? So there is something to be said about, and obviously this is not rocket science. I mean, everybody's question on everybody's minds is, hey, how do we make sure that we don't just leak our data to third party models, right, and make it accessible to other people? So
are there any open source data sets out there that that you
sure.
could use? Yeah.
Sure. I mean, those open source data sets could be, I don't know, around weather or,
Right.
okay,
Okay.
I mean, I think, so depending on your use case, I think there are open source data sets. But the thing about open source data sets is everybody has access to it. So if you build an AI system, right, with
Right.
that underlying data, then other people can use it as well. So that is not a moat. But now, in terms of moat, right, like Y Combinator, YC, just I don't know, a week or two ago, they released they released some prompt, how to build best-in-class prompts, for example, that they have from their startup cohort, and it's like a 6-page thing about how you would instruct an LLM. And I think the takeaway there is prompts are becoming extremely sophisticated. You have to be very detailed, and I think Andrich Karpathy calls it context tuning, or there's another term, right? Instead of prompting, prompt engineering or context engineering, I think. Yes. So giving the right context, I think, becomes super important. But that context is also going to kind of come from your internal data sources, right? So data pipelines, and this is where I think maybe things like Databricks and Snowflake shine, which is we have our internal data repositories, and we can make it enable give access to the models and to agents to all those data sources. Now that's a big unlock, honestly, right? Like, and you have to be able to do it easily without having the data science teams or AI teams having to struggle over it a lot. Conversely, not conversely, but as a corollary, even if you're in sales or marketing in a company or enterprise, how do you effectively give access to what is with you? Of course, all of this, RBAC is involved, right? Role-based access control, right? All of those kind of pieces come in as well. So this is a super interesting area. I mean, and I think we are. I've been building multi-agent systems now for AI plus multi-agent systems at PipeIQ for 2.5 years now, and I mean, I'm super bullish and super enthusiastic about wanting to enable other organizations kind of take the knowledge we have, our learnings, and help others as well sort of build out some of these systems. So, but I think it all starts with data. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, that's I'd say there's framing. There's if you have some data, then you can get started with owning your own data, unless you just have a problem set that you need to use somebody else's data as well, right?
Yeah,
And
that's also true.
obviously
I mean,
true.
yeah. Your
Right.
your question around that, I think this is where MCP probably is a good sort of introduction into our sort of conversation, right?
Right.
MCP, which stands for Model Context Protocol, is an emerging standard. We have spoken about it in our previous, I think, last couple of webinars
Right.
or podcasts, right? Like it came out of Anthropic and definitely is gaining steam. The MCPs allow you to basically put a wrapper around any API and make it sort of available to a natural language input, so to speak. So, I mean, that's, I guess, the simplest sort of way of articulating it from my standpoint. But if you had a third-party data source, say, a bunch of leads that you had to pull from a third-party source, or a list of companies, or go talk to a MCP server that is going to tell you the weather, for example, right?
Right.
So I was talking to the
And that's where the open source, are there models that are the data sets out there that I could get, and MCP allows you, there's MCP brokers
Yes.
that get at data sets.
Absolutely.
And are some of them free and are some of them charge? How does that work?
Yeah, I think MCP. Yeah, there are some MCP like there's Composer.dev, which has an open source repo, for example. So you can actually go run it, right? Like, and there's like 100 plus connectors or something like that. So that's completely free, so to speak. But if you use their hosted versions, then of course it's paid and so on. So there are options available. There are absolutely options available, right? And MCP is an open sort of protocol at this point.
Right.
I think,
And I know some of the platform vendors, like let's say you are using a WordPress platform or you are using a community platform, they are starting, the platform vendors are coming out with MCP interfaces so that you can then, connect those into your AI engine. right?
exactly. So now, I mean, you will see over the next 12 to 36 months, more and more APIs just become MCP servers, right? Like, so they'll all become AI ready, so to speak. So that is going to be the new sort of situation where you have a server, it has access to a bunch of tools. So if I ask a question, you can pass that question straight up to that MCP server, if it's a single agent sort of system, right? And get an answer and come back in. And there are companies that are building, there's authentication, access management, there's security, right? There's a bunch of questions that need to be solved around for MCP. And we understand some of that, sort of frameworks of what needs to be used. And these are all important considerations, honestly.
Right.
I mean, there's a company that allows you to, spin up a virtualized sandbox for running your piece of LLM code.
I was going to actually get to that next, which was, you can't have these conversations without talking about AWS, right?
Yeah.
And what does AWS give you? Because AWS is the monster in giving you a quick VM or virtual machine or a SaaS service.
Yeah.
It's your own platform that you can then start modifying. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that they have,
Yeah.
models that are built in that you can go spin up a server with a model connected,
Yeah, absolutely.
get your
So, I mean,
$25 a month bill.
Yeah. No, I mean, AWS has, of course, extensive cloud infra.
But I don't like them because I'd rather just buy a Raspberry Pi and do it myself and
Please.
avoid the $3,000 a year or $5,000. I think for a one server solution now on AWS, in their EC2 environment, I think it's about $1,000 a month, right? Or maybe $800 a month.
Yeah.
$800 a month for what I could just buy $1,000 server and put it in a rack somewhere, and they would cost me $1,000 plus co-host cage costs, maybe another $500 a year, so $1,500 versus $12,000 for AWS.
You can start with Lambda functions,
Yeah,
potentially
right,
Lambdas, right?
right.
But to their credit, I mean, for startups, folks who are listening on this startup and want to do a startup, they have a awesome startup program, and we have benefited from it. So shout out to AWS for that, right?
Right.
They've been amazing, right? Like it's great, right? So, but again,
But
right?
I'm relating it back to the Apache days where you could just go, everybody
Yeah,
want to go
sure,
set up
sure.
a website. They could go set up a website. No, it's more complicated, and you got
Right.
WordPress instances, and you got nobody's setting up Apache websites anymore. But I feel like AI enablement, right?
Yeah.
If we start looking at AI solutions, how do you get started in this? Frame your question, frame your data set. and then look for a cloud service or an on-prem.
Yeah, look for a cloud
compute-
service.
right.
I would say, I mean, for most organizations, at least this is my take, right? Maybe some sort of a quick cloud solution might make sense, right? Could be Fireworks AI, could be Together AI, could be Hugging Face. Depends on your use case, right? Could be just OpenAI APIs. There's a bunch of choices. Now the key metric, right? Which I think any organization would probably want to do is time to market. How quickly can we deploy? How quickly can we start and see results, right? Now, that's the whole question here, right? Really, right? So how quickly can I get to that answer is the question. And that may possibly depend on, sort of unique individual situations, right? And how much flexibility there is in the organization for doing experiments, right? So I think there is a little bit of that, Eric, for sure. That you have to think through, but now is the time. Now is the time. There's no two ways about it, right? Like, I think now is not the time to be shy and hesitate, right? You have to find ways as an organization to create space for people, for AI projects to be curated, number one, and curated, approved, right? The appropriate ID infrastructure around it also to be in place. I think obviously that's important, right? Because, I mean, otherwise, how are you going to have a systematic, scalable way for AI projects to come to fruition, right? Even pilots, for that matter. Because, look, I mean, if you don't do this properly, you are going to be super behind 2 years from now or 3 years from now. Like, you're going to get screwed. Like, so I think it's very important.
I don't know about that.
Really?
I don't. I think that you sound like a product launch specialist, right? When I was listening to these product launches, they're all like, "It's amazing, it's fantastic, it's so crazy. These features are." Yeah. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I don't need to adopt any of this stuff. I'll be fine, right? Like, it's exciting to other people that are trying to sell it, right? But for us that are trying to, build solutions and just focus on moving the company forward, I'm like, frame your problem, identify what you can get, what data center you have, and then work on it, right? And I'll give you an example of how we do things at VMware. We have a company hackathon,
right?
Twice a year, and everybody gets 4 days off. The boss gives the 4 days off, and Facebook does this too, right?
Yeah.
Where everybody gets in a room and you get to go build a solution.
Sure.
Right?
That's great.
Go get your Raspberry Pi, get your x86 server, put it on a machine. Everybody brings their own little gear. They plug it in. They got a little team of 5 guys, and they work on something.
Right.
The winners of the hackathon, right, get their project funded.
Right.
Then they get to go do it for real, right? Like, okay, they get to get a $500,000 budget to go implement it because your idea was good enough to win, right? Because this is the other thing we've learned about AI, and I believe, Rajesh, you've learned this, is that just because you have an idea doesn't mean it's a good one. Right?
No,
and so how do you know, even if you framed it with your own data set and you framed, what you can do with it, like that it's going to work, or that it's even has value, right? So
the value, Eric, is going to come from the pain, right? Like, so if you have a particular pain, right, that needs to be solved, you got to.
That's the beauty thing of a hackathon. You get to present your idea to 100 people in the room.
Sure.
And then the judges get to vote like, yeah, that's nice, but it's never going to, that's customers aren't going to do that, or it doesn't have enough value to really warrant the $1 million investment we'd have to do. Right. So getting that feedback, so building, prototyping something that then once you've got that done, you can demo and show that it actually does have value, or no, it doesn't, because we relied on 3 agents and the agents were only 20% effective, and so by the time we were done, multiply the probabilities of bugs, and the next thing you know, it's only giving you an answer every other time.
Yes, yes. No, I mean, there is no. I love the hackathons idea, right? Now I just don't know. Let's say HR, right? So, enterprise company, 3,000 employees. You have HR department. God knows, let's say 40 people, right, or 50 people in that department. Now, they're not going to do hackathons. Are there IT people who are serving that department?
Yeah, but I don't think anybody that's a HR person is listening to this podcast. This is my
Why
point.
not? I mean,
because they're not.
I mean, I see there must be. I mean, there's like, I don't know. I see 150 or 170 people on my screen here. That's the number I'm seeing.
Right.
Some of them are going to be non-coders, right? Like, so
that's different than HR people.
Sorry?
That's different than HR.
They're different HR. What about a sales or marketing guy? I don't know.
Yeah,
right?
you could have a sales and marketing guy.
Or working in finance, payroll.
Right.
Many examples, right?
Right.
They still have to. I mean, they're all going to have to think about.
Then they should just ask ChatGPT to build them a solution and let it build a solution.
Oh,
I heard that, by the way, that a guy of mine was writing code applications and they were just using AI to build it all.
Right,
So
right.
nobody is even building anything on their own anymore.
It's insane. I mean, the quality. I mean, I've used Cursor myself, and that thing can spin up whole applications. I mean, end to end, including test scripts and so on. But
Right.
somebody has to validate it. That's the thing. I mean, there is hallucination depending on the use case, right? But yeah, if you give it the right documentation, I mean.
But to your point, whether it's a hackathon or whether it's you and some buddies or you and your department, I think you have to be fairly technical to like frame the problem, figure out the data set, connect the data set with the services. Right. So my guess is that if you've never built a website before, you're probably not going to want to be building these either, right?
Yeah. And it's not a website, right? And it need not even be an application, right? Like maybe use Zapier to connect your Slack channel to, let's say your website form, right? Every time there's a website form fill out, send me a Slack message, right? Somebody as an individual could do this, right? Sort of shadow IT, I guess, right? Like so to speak. So there could be lots of small things that people are already doing. I mean, that's why we are seeing a lot of traction with, say, N8N and, some of these sort of connector providers. A lot of them are seeing, strong growth from what I can tell. Right. I mean, anyway, this is a huge thing. I mean, I think AI, again, I don't mean to sound like a product launch specialist here, but there's just a ton of opportunity.
Right.
Now,
now, there's definitely some enterprises that already have big data sets, right? So if you're on Snowflake, right, you've got a big data set, and then you will probably have an idea of what you could do with that data set,
right?
And then you're in the space of, okay, do we hire a vendor to come in, a specialist like PipeIQ to come in and actually help implement that vision of what we thought we could do with this data,
right?
And then that's like at a level above just learning AI and getting an AI started. You're actually going to then scope out with a third party like yourselves or others that can come in and actually say, well, we built this already 6 other times, we can spec it for you and give you a quote, cut $100,000 and we'll build some stage of that for you for a POC and then scope out the rest of the implementation.
That's right. Absolutely. I mean, I think that, a lot of companies are sitting on years and years of data, right? So how do you use it effectively is not entirely clear. Even exposing it to customers is an even bigger sort of issue, but you should, some part of that is going to be useful. I mean, chatbots is a very simple, straightforward use case that has gained a lot of momentum, like with Intercom and others, right? Cutting your customer support costs, right, is one of the... There's code gen and then there's customer support. I think there have been 2 demonstrable use cases in the last 2.5, 3 years, right, where AI has shown, I think, substantial success. So if you're not doing something both with code gen and with customer support, I mean, those are easy wins. There's stuff around ads, around marketing, around sales, around just freeing up your sales account executives' time, right? Like there's multiple places, and a lot of this is going to be measurable, right? Also, that's very important, right? So this is not just
Well, you're looking at it from a customer data perspective, but I'm looking. I tend to look at it as, I like Tesla. I like device support. I want my refrigerator to be smarter, right? Or I want some piece of hardware that has a data set that you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, I can do something with that data set, right? Like my refrigerator has data in it, right? If I you put the refrigerator online and I have data, my refrigerator can get smart, right? And so it's not necessarily just customer data and chat. It's also how do I make my car last longer on the road? How do I make my refrigerator not break down? And how do I send a salesperson or a repair person out, before it breaks to replace the part that is starting to behave differently?
Okay,
right?
So now we are talking about predictive maintenance in this specific example.
Maintenance,
right?
or what does your product need? Right? And then or my server farm is now starting starting to experience a problem. I know we do that at VMware, right?
Yeah.
We have AI built into the monitoring apps, and if we see trends now, then we know those trends result to failure. Even though we don't know what the failure is, we know that when you get this amount of load on your storage devices, you're going to see failure sooner or later. So let's send somebody out to say, hey, you need to re-architect, put in some more storage arrays. Right. So there is AI that can do a lot of things, right, for systems, right?
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, we didn't even go into predictive analytics at all, right? Actually, I mean, the whole notion of sort of dashboards and so on, right? I mean, you have data, you get insights from the data, and from those insights, basically, you spin up visual dashboards of some sort that's consumable by humans, right? By execs.
So when you guys are looking at Databricks, because I know you're a Databricks guy, right? Or you partner with Databricks. Are you mostly looking at the customer data, like sales acceleration data, or have you seen Databricks having all kinds of data?
So one use case that we were looking at, for example, is IoT data, right? So data coming in from IoT devices, streaming data. And then you run agents on top of that, right? To harvest insights, basically. No, not just harvest insights, but act on those insights. So that's the key point, right? So the data could be static, streaming data. That's one example. Another example is just data coming in from solar providers, right? We are in a conversation where the company has solar installations and they install. So we're looking at some of their sales and marketing data to see what can be done from a revenue standpoint. That's just one example. Somebody was telling me yesterday about, how the government is gives rebates to these solar installs, but there's no useful, correct way to collate it, right? So we were thinking through some ideas around, does some of that stuff go into blockchain maybe for auditability, etc., right? So we as Databricks partners, Databricks actually is a very interesting system. I mean, pretty lots of different things, but it's all vertically stacked, right? And the team has a very strong DNA around AI in general. So that's a very, even they have already incorporated support for MCP servers and so on. So I kind of like what I see there, honestly. And we've been sort of playing with it, and we are sort of agent first. I mean, we did agents before we sort of became Databricks partners. So we kind of bring that our DNA into the sort of mix here. So not just Databricks, but could be any data source, honestly, right? You could have HubSpot, Salesforce, Marketo, Gong, product data, coming in from Pendo or some of these product plays, right? And we can look at that product data also. So when you say customer, Eric, I'm not necessarily looking only at that. Could be logistics information, who knows, right? But we are interested in revenue questions, really, right? I mean, some of the key questions that we are interested in is upsell use cases, cross-sell use cases, upsell, cross-sell, net new customer acquisition, which is sort of our home in a way. And then the last one is churn, customer churn. So all of those kind of come out of data. All of those are customer-centric sort of data sets, right? But if there is something coming out of refrigerators, or there are companies like Samsara and others who have IoT device data, right? So that's a different sort of use case. But yes, we can absolutely work with data of any sort and build agents, because that's kind of our competency now, right? And we know what frameworks to use, what backend models to use, how to optimize these agents. We have our battle scars on that. And it's still sort of early, right? I think agents have just started to work. But what I hear is a lot of companies just don't have the pipelines ready, first of all. So, we'll first make that happen if that's what is needed, right? Let's get all the data in the right fashion format. Does it need to be brought in one place? Maybe we can use sort of MCP endpoints, right? So there's, again, different ways to skin the cat. The how, right, is there are many ways to do it, right? The question is what, right?
So when you're working with customers, and we talked about what do you need to do? You need to frame the problem, right? And you got to identify the data set.
Right.
Do you guys get into working with them on framing the problem to limit the problem?
Absolutely.
In order to
I come from a consulting background. Right. I spent 2 years at McKinsey. I was at Bearing Point before then.
Because I know the AI that we talked about was always investigating, right? right? Like it's always investigating. And I
know.
think that's part of the framing the problem, right?
Yeah,
Framing that and understanding your data set. And do you have a problem that your
Yeah.
data set will then generate, then an AI model would then generate a solution?
Absolutely. And, to be honest, right, like if you take, again, a decent sized enterprise today, they probably have, tens of projects going on right now, right, with some aggregate budgets for pilots, coming from pilot budgets, right? Now, somebody needs to sort of look through and kind of build a picture on that as well, right? And then kind of dive into each of those and see, right, are each of those individual groups or teams, what are they working on, and how can we enable that this sort of a blooming of 1,000 flowers or something, I don't know, right? Like that's kind of what is really needed, actually, curation. And somebody needs to have the right kind of mental model for that, actually, right? You need to be very forward focused and be abreast of what's out there, right? Because the thing is, right, you start working with a Llama model today, right? In 3 months, they're going to release a new one, and then boom, all the work that you did on this, if you don't know how to move the fine tuning that you did from this model to the next one, all your work is wasted, right?
No, just stay on the current model.
Well, no need. I mean, there are services that you can use to port over all that fine-tuned model data in 15 minutes. Why wouldn't you do it? Right? Because you can leverage all the new capabilities. So,
Frame the problem.
yes.
Target
yes.
a data set.
Yeah.
Build a solution that addresses the problem.
Agreed.
Because I feel like everybody's always investigating, and if you don't, freeze your build environment or your then you're just going to be chasing your tail.
No. I mean, the build environment here, right, is that the front end is not going to change. Like, let's say the pilot is about some front end interface for the customer. Customer meaning internal customer, right? Let's say somebody in HR is going to use it. Let's just say ask questions of employee questions, for example. Now that is not going to change, but you got to keep changing the back end, right? Like to keep it up with the latest and greatest, as much as possible, right?
And for me, I feel like there's going to be a lot of third-party platforms that we use in today's business market that will implement this, right? They're going to be building solutions around AI, right? And delivering it to customers, right? Yeah. So I don't know if customers are going to be the ones that are going to go implement AI to their data set. They've already got platforms that are interfacing with their customers, and the platforms are going to come, and probably a lot of the listeners that we've got right now are platform vendors, right? People that are working on the platforms themselves, right? Or have a platform that they're thinking about, how could I implement some AI service to my platform? And that's what I am, right? I'm a platform guy, right? And then we're looking at how we implement some AI as part of our platform to our end user.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think there's the whole question of crypto. I mean, AI native vendors, right? Like, so AI first vendors and then legacy players, right? So what kind of choices do you make? Maybe you're on Salesforce, and Salesforce has their own AI offerings, right? And then you have a bunch of newer startups, right, that have some play, right? How do you? I mean, just today there was an announcement about somebody getting funded for like 33 mil, and it's a new take on CRM, right? Like, so that's basically a competitor to Salesforce, So what kind of choices do you make? I mean, it's part of the sort of thought process, I guess, is all I would say. And I think things like Databricks, for example, allow you to actually embed using your data. Embed new ways of embed AI into your current workflows. Now that is where the unlock is actually. I completely agree with you, Eric, which is, hey, how can we not disrupt the flow? Like, again, like what are you trying to achieve, right? And how do we get productivity out of what is there, right? So it need not necessarily involve, complete retraining of a workflow or for the workforce for that matter, right? So there's a little bit of that, absolutely. But yeah, again, I mean, I'm a big fan of off the shelf, right? Like I use what has already been created. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Is kind of my general point of view, right? Because that'll allow you to get there fastest, to show results, show ROI, right? So
I tend to be I tend to be the turtle, right? Like, which is frame the problem, don't be in a hurry, work at it, and then deliver it, and you'll get where you're supposed to be going, right? Like, and so for me, when I'm approaching this, like, we're doing some of this, right, at VMware, and we are implementing community platforms, and we are doing some AI for that, and we're framing the problem, we're building solutions for it, and we're not in a hurry,
Right.
We already have a customer base. Our customer base isn't going anywhere,
Right.
So I'd rather think it through, identify a problem, don't go crazy on the solution, implement it, make it successful, right? And then you have something that you can build on, right? And,
Absolutely. I mean, again, this is where, the whole testing and, when I was talking about deployment to production was concerned. I mean, yes, there has to be some sort of benchmarking, some testing, right? Like clearly you need to do that, no doubt about it. So I think a measured approach obviously is important, not to say no, but again, I mean, business velocity, I'm sure in your business as well, right? That's always front and center.
Right, and that's the difference between being an AI player versus being a legacy that just wants to start building some AI.
Right.
And in most enterprises, if you're an enterprise, you are legacy. So, building our own enterprise AI solutions was the title of the podcast. And it's like, an enterprise is legacy, right?
Right.
They're not an AI vendor. They're not trying to do 15 different things.
Right.
They're just an enterprise that want to move the needle next year, right?
Right.
Building our 2026 plans.
Right.
All right, this is how we want to do that. So that's my
true.
2 cents there, right?
No, absolutely. Same here.
Right.
I mean, I think, everybody's got to protect their revenue, right? Which is the boat Google is in. And then somebody is at their heels, OpenAI, right. Trying to grow their base. And so OpenAI is obviously more flexibility than a Google, right, in terms of how they implement things.
Well, we've been running an hour here, so it's a fun topic. And
Awesome.
I think we'll come in and drill down a little bit deeper on, how to build enterprise solutions. So I'd like to look at RAG, and maybe we'll talk specifically on one of the models and how RAG is actually done, right? How do I augment that so that so if you wanted to go get your Raspberry Pi and set up your LLM, you could actually then do RAG on it, or if you got an x86 server, so that if you listen to us, we're going to take you on that journey. We'll split it between what you can do yourself versus what you can do on a SaaS platform, and we'll talk a little bit about those connectors and agents that are available, and that'll be our next show.
Okay, awesome.
Right.
I love that, Eric.
All right.
Good chatting.
Thanks a lot, and everybody have a good rest of your week. It's going to be 4th of July coming up next week, and so maybe we'll get one out, maybe we won't, depending on the travel plans for 4th of July in the United States, but we'll be back.
Awesome. Sounds good. Bye-bye, guys.